left beside the trash. Her eyes still moved. The night was cold on the outer edge of the alien colony. Metal walls rattled in the wind. Trash piles sat in the corners like forgotten memories. No one looked at them. No one cared. That's where they left her. Wrapped in a thin gray sheet, a small alien girl was placed between two garbage bins. Her skin was pale blue and her long white hair was messy and tangled. She looked like a doll someone had broken and thrown away. Her name was Lyra. She was 17 cycles old. She could not move her arms or legs. Her parents said she was cursed. They believed her broken body brought shame to their bloodline. So one night they carried her out quietly and left her there like trash. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't cry. They only looked once to make sure she wasn't breathing, loud enough to be noticed. But Lyra was still alive. Her eyes blinked slowly. They were bright green, glowing gently in the darkness. Her body was silent, but her mind screamed. She felt the cold ground under her. She heard the buzzing lights above her. She saw shadows move past her. No one stopped. No one asked. They had seen paralyzed ones before. In many alien cultures, weakness was hidden or destroyed. But someone saw her. From across the street, a man stood watching. He was human. His name was Jack. He had come to the colony looking for spare ship parts. He lived alone, moved quietly, and didn't trust people. But when he saw Lyra lying there, something deep inside him felt heavy. He stared at her for a long time. He thought maybe she was dead. But then her eyes moved. Slowly. Weakly. But they moved. Jack stepped closer. Lyra could hear his footsteps. They were heavier than alien steps. She held her breath. Was this the end? Would he finish what her family started? But Jack didn't leave. He knelt down. His eyes met hers. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Jack said in a soft voice, "Can you hear me?" Lyra blinked twice. That was all she could do. Blink. But Jack understood. He reached out and gently touched her wrist. She was cold. So cold. He wrapped his old jacket around her. She blinked again. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I don't know who you are," Jack whispered, "but you shouldn't be here." She wanted to answer. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry and tell him everything. But no words came from her lips. Jack looked around. No one paid attention. No one cared. He gently lifted her in his arms. She was so light, it scared him. Like lifting air. Lyra's heart beat faster. This was the first time someone had touched her with kindness in years. As he carried her away, people stared. Some whispered, others laughed. "Look at that human," one said. "Taking the broken one," said another. "Maybe he'll use her for spare parts." Jack ignored them all. He took her to his small ship at the edge of the station. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't clean, but it was warm and safe. He laid her gently on a soft bed and covered her in blankets. He gave her warm broth with a tube. She blinked to thank him. He sat beside her and said, "I don't know why your people did this, but I promise you something, you're not trash, not to me." That night Lyra didn't sleep. Her body was still frozen, but her mind raced. For the first time in a long time, she felt something new. Hope. She didn't know who Jack was. She didn't know if he could help her walk again. She didn't even know if he'd keep her after tonight. But one thing was clear. He had seen her. He had picked her up when everyone else looked away. She lay there, eyes open, breathing slow, and in her mind she repeated one small, powerful thought. "I am still alive. I'm not broken. I'm just trapped." The ship was quiet, filled with the soft hum of old machines. Jack sat beside her, fixing a cracked panel with slow hands. He didn't speak much, but every now and then, he looked at her to make sure she was still breathing. Lyra watched him with her eyes. That was all she could do. No sound came from her lips. No fingers moved. But her mind was full of words, full of questions, full of pain. She had expected to be left alone forever. But this human, this stranger, was different. He brought her water, warmed her food, and covered her with blankets each night. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't look at her with fear or pity. He just treated her like a person. Something no one had done in years. One evening, he placed a small device near her head. It was a voice reader that connected to her brain signals. It took time to adjust. It buzzed and glitched at first. But then, after hours of trial and error, it worked. Her first word echoed through the quiet ship. "Hello." Jack froze, then turned to her with wide eyes. "That was you?" he asked. Lyra blinked once. The machine translated the signal. "Yes." Jack smiled. Just a little. It wasn't a big smile, but it meant everything to her. Over the next few days, they spoke more, slowly, carefully. Lyra told him her name. He told her his. She told him what happened, how she had been born with a nervous condition that spread through her spine, how her parents spent years hiding her from the world, how they finally gave up and left her beside the trash. She said it without hate, without anger, just facts. Like telling a story that no longer belonged to her. Jack listened quietly. Then he asked something no one ever had. "What do you want, Lyra?" She paused. The answer was simple, but also the most painful. "I want to be free," she said. "Not just to walk. I want to live, laugh, touch the stars." Jack nodded. He didn't promise anything. He didn't lie, but he said the words that made her believe again. "Then let's try." From that moment, things changed. Jack began scanning her brain activity. He searched old human databases for anything related to neural damage. He used scrap metal, wires, and parts from broken robots. Every day he came back with something new to test. A new sensor, a voice booster, a brain link chip. Most of it failed. But Lyra didn't care, because every failure meant he hadn't given up. As they worked, she shared more. She told him about her favorite sounds, the way wind used to whistle through the caves of her home planet. She told him she liked the stars even though she'd never seen them from space. She told him that sometimes she dreamed of dancing. Jack never laughed at her dreams. He just nodded and said, "We'll see what we can do." One night, after long silence, Lyra asked him something new. "Why are you helping me?" Jack was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Because no one helped me once. I remember what that felt like." Lyra understood. She didn't ask more. They were two broken lives floating in the dark. But together, something new had started. She was still trapped inside her body, but her spirit was waking up. Every hour, with Jack felt like breathing fresh air after years underground. She still couldn't move. She still needed help to eat, drink, and speak. But her mind was sharp, alive, and full of energy. She began helping Jack with ship tasks, calculating engine output, mapping safe travel paths, analyzing data from sensors. Jack was surprised. "You're smarter than half the engineers I've worked with," he said. Lyra smiled through the machine. "Maybe even smarter than you." Jack laughed. It was the first time she'd heard him do that. It was rough, short, and real. She liked the sound. That night, as the ship floated silently in space, Lyra looked up at the stars through the small window. She didn't feel broken anymore. She felt awake. She felt ready. And somewhere deep inside, a new thought was growing. I am not a burden. I am a mind worth saving. She wasn't free yet, but she was no longer forgotten. She was becoming something more. Her body was failing, but her mind was brilliant. Every morning began the same way. Jack would bring warm tea, check her vitals, and say, "Ready to try again?" And every morning Lyra would blink once. Yes. That blink meant more than words. It meant she still had fight left in her. Her body refused to obey her. Muscles stayed still. Bones didn't respond. But inside, her brain worked like a storm. She could do things most people couldn't. She remembered every number Jack told her. She corrected his flight path calculations in seconds. When he struggled with fuel balances, she suggested a new method, one she had created in her head during the long nights of silence. At first, Jack thought she was just guessing, but after a few trials, her numbers proved perfect. He stared at her in surprise. "How did you know that would work?" "I don't know," Lyra replied through the device. "I just see it all like a puzzle. It fits." That's when Jack realized Lyra wasn't just smart, she was a genius. Her brain was working faster than most of the ship computers he'd ever seen, and she had been left beside trash. The more they worked together, the more she learned. She asked questions about ship design, gravity engines, even alien languages. She remembered everything. Jack began teaching her old Earth math and physics. She absorbed it like light through glass. But even as her mind soared, her body began to weaken. Her skin turned pale. She slept longer. Her breathing grew slower on some nights. Jack noticed the changes. He said nothing, but his eyes were darker and his hands shook more when he fixed her chair or adjusted her headrest. He didn't want to admit it, but time was running out. Lyra knew it too. She didn't speak about it. She didn't complain. Instead, she worked harder. She used her energy to design a machine, a special exo-support system, something that could move her limbs using brain commands. A suit that could give her back control. Jack stared at the blueprint she had drawn with her eyes and voice. "You made this?" "I dreamed it first," she said. "Then I built it in my head." Jack couldn't believe it. The design was old tech, but her improvements made it something new. Something elegant, something powerful. If it worked, she could walk again, maybe not forever, maybe not without pain. But she could stand. She could live. They didn't have all the parts. Not yet. But they began building it piece by piece. Jack soldered wires while she guided him. She told him which circuits to use, which joints needed dampeners, which metal could handle heat better. It was like she was the engineer and he was just the hands. One evening, while testing a motor coil, Jack stopped and looked at her. "You've already saved me, you know," he said softly. She blinked twice. "What do you mean?" "I came here just to fix my ship," he replied. "But now, I want to fix something more important." Lyra didn't speak, but inside she felt her chest tighten. She hadn't felt this way in a long time, not since she was little, not since before the paralysis took her limbs, and the world turned cold. That night she stayed awake long after Jack slept beside the control panel. She looked at him, his messy hair, his rough hands, the way he breathed heavy when he finally allowed himself to rest, and for the first time in years she whispered in her heart, "I don't want to die." Because now there was someone who saw her, not as broken, not as weak, but as brilliant. Her body was still trapped, but her mind had already broken free. A dangerous offer. Trade the girl and live. The quiet peace of their small ship didn't last forever. Word had started to spread. At first it was just whispers, rumors of a human sheltering a broken alien girl. But then came the messages, warnings, threats. Lyra's own people were talking again, not because they missed her, but because they were embarrassed. In their culture, weakness was a stain, and someone had discovered that Stain was still alive. One day, without warning, a loud knock shook the side of Jack's ship. Jack looked at Lyra. Her heart was already racing. She knew that sound. She remembered it from childhood. The heavy fists of her older brother. The voice that followed made her eyes grow cold. "Open up, human, you have something that doesn't belong to you." Jack stood at the door, not moving. He glanced at Lyra, and she blinked once, slowly. "Yes, it's them." When Jack opened the hatch, 3 tall figures stood outside. Their eyes glowed under the dark hoods. The tallest stepped forward. His skin was the same shade as Lyra's. His jaw was tight, his voice was sharp. "My name is Sorek. That girl inside is my sister. She was left behind for a reason." Jack kept his tone calm. "You left her to die." Sorek didn't blink. "It was her fate." You had no right to interfere. Jack stepped forward. She's not your property. She's a person. The alien's hand moved to his belt. A thin weapon buzzed with blue light. We won't fight if we don't have to, Sorek said coldly. Give her to us now, and we'll spare you. Inside the ship, Lyra could hear everything. The words cut through her like knives. She had feared this moment. She knew her family would come eventually, not out of love, but to erase their shame, to make her disappear. She sent a voice message to Jack through the ship's speaker. Let them take me. Jack turned to the speaker. No. Please, she said. They'll kill you. Jack stared at the leader, then back at the ship. No, he repeated louder. They already tried to kill you. I won't let them finish the job. Sorek stepped forward. You're a fool, human. This is not your fight. She's not even your kind. But Jack didn't move. She's better than all of you combined. The air around them grew tense. The guards behind Sorek gripped their weapons tighter, but Sorek raised a hand. We'll give you time. One day. Decide if her life is worth your death. Then they left, their cloaks blowing behind them like shadows fading into night. Jack sealed the door and sat beside Lyra. He looked tired, but not afraid. Lyra tried to speak through the device, but the words were broken. You shouldn't have said no. I didn't just say no, he answered. I said never. Lyra stared at him. Her thoughts were spinning. She had been afraid of dying for so long, but now she was more afraid of losing him, more afraid of being taken away again, not to be saved, but to be erased. I'm not worth it, she said. Jack leaned closer. You are. Not because you're perfect, not because you're strong, but because you're you. And I've seen more courage in your eyes than in all the soldiers I've ever met. She wanted to cry, but her body wouldn't let her. Still, inside her heart was louder than ever. This man, a human, was willing to fight an entire culture to protect her. Not for glory, not for reward, just because he believed her life mattered. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt like someone worth standing up for, and she knew, no matter what came next, she would fight too. Not with her body, but with her mind, her ideas, and the voice he helped her find again. Because she wasn't just a girl they threw away, she was the beginning of something they could never control. The human's gamble, a secret device of hope. The countdown had begun. They had one day, one final chance before Lyra's brother returned with weapons or worse. Jack didn't waste a single second. He moved through the ship with speed and purpose, collecting tools, pulling wires, scanning Lyra's latest blueprints like they were treasure maps. The clock was ticking, and he was about to gamble everything on a machine built from scraps, dreams, and faith. Lyra watched him from the bed. Her body was still weak, but her mind was sharp. She had designed the suit in her head. Each joint, each signal point, each neuroconnection mapped with care. She had never touched a tool, never held a wire, but she remembered everything she had read, heard, and imagined. She had created the idea. Now Jack was turning that idea into something real. It wasn't just a support suit. It was a second body. One that would wrap around her like armor and obey her thoughts. If it worked, she could move. If it failed, the overload could burn out her brain signals forever. There was no second chance. Jack didn't tell her the risks. He didn't need to. She already knew. As he tightened the last bolt, he turned to her. His face was tired, his hands were shaking, but his eyes were steady. Are you ready? Lyra blinked once. Even if I fall, she said through the speaker, I want to fall standing. He smiled. That was the answer he needed. He lifted her gently and lowered her into the suit. It wrapped around her like a cocoon of cold metal and soft padding. He connected the wires to her neural link. The lights on the suit blinked red, then yellow, then green. The connection was live. Lyra closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind. She pictured her hand lifting. Nothing. Then again, Her fingers twitched. Jack gasped. "Lyra, that was you." She opened her eyes. She tried again. This time the hand moved, slow, shaking, like a leaf in the wind. But it moved. Then her arm bent. Her knee shifted. A breath caught in her throat. She could feel something. Not fully, but enough. Enough to try harder. She moved her foot. Then, with every part of her mind focused, she leaned forward. The suit stood up. Jack stepped back, stunned. She was standing. Not perfect. Not smooth. But upright. After all these years. After all the pain. She was on her feet. A soft laugh escaped her mouth. Her real mouth. Not through the speaker. It was weak, broken, but alive. She looked at Jack. "I'm not paralyzed anymore," she said. "I'm just beginning." Tears filled his eyes, but he wiped them away quickly. "You've got less than a day," he said. "Think you can practice walking?" Lyra took one small step forward, then another. Every step was pain. Every motion was a storm inside her head. But she kept going. She walked across the room, slow, unsteady, but proud. She turned and said, "Let them come." Because now she had more than hope. She had strength, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. Standing before her enemies, they came as promised, at sunrise. The sky above the outpost was thick with dust. 3 shadowy ships lowered onto the ground outside Jack's vessel. Alien soldiers stepped out in formation, armed and armored, ready to finish what they had started. In the center stood Sorek, Lyra's brother, his face hard, his pride burning. But this time Lyra was not lying on the floor. She walked out slowly, each step controlled by thought and will. The support suit wrapped around her slim frame like silver armor, humming quietly with power. Her steps were shaky, but they were hers. For the first time in her life, her body obeyed her. The soldiers froze. So did Sorek. He stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. You're walking?" Lyra didn't smile. Her voice came through her lips, not the device. "I'm standing, brother, and I'm not yours anymore." The silence around them was heavy. Jack stood behind her, unarmed but unafraid. Sorek's eyes narrowed. "You think a walking corpse makes you whole again?" Lyra took another step forward. "I was never broken. You just refused to see me." He motioned for the soldiers to advance. "We gave you a peaceful way out, but now—" "No," Lyra cut in. Her voice was calm but sharp. "You're not here to help me. You're here to erase your shame. But I'm not your secret anymore." Some of the guards looked uncertain now. This was not the helpless girl they had once ignored. This was someone who had risen from nothing. Someone who had done the impossible. "You would shame us in front of the galaxy?" Sorek growled. "I'm not the one who brought shame," she said. "You are. You left your sister to die, but a stranger picked me up and gave me life. He believed in me when my own family wouldn't." Sorek raised his weapon. "Enough." But Lyra didn't flinch. The suit adjusted to her movement as she raised her hand, slowly with effort, and pointed it at him. Not with a weapon, but with truth. "Shoot me if you must," she said. "But the galaxy will know who I am now. I'm not a burden, I'm a survivor." For a moment, no one moved. Then one of the soldiers dropped his weapon. Then another stepped back. Sorek looked around, realizing he was no longer in control. "You're no longer welcome in our house," he said bitterly. "I don't want your house," she replied. "I've built my own." Sorek turned without another word. The ships lifted into the air and vanished into the sky. Jack walked up beside her. "You didn't just stand up to them," he said. "You stood up for yourself." Lyra turned toward him, her legs trembling. She almost fell, but Jack caught her gently. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. "No," Jack said, smiling. "You just needed someone to believe what you already were." And in that quiet, broken place where her story had nearly ended, Lyra finally began again. Not as the girl they left behind, but as the woman who refused to stay down. A new beginning for them both. The sky was quiet now. The ships were gone. The threats had faded. But the moment remained, etched forever in Lyra's memory. For years, she had lived in silence, frozen in a body that refused to move. For years, she had been a secret, a burden, a shame. But now, she stood trembling but tall beside the man who had seen her differently, not as broken, not as weak, but as someone worth saving. Jack helped her back inside the ship. Her legs were tired, her body sore from the effort, but her eyes were glowing. The suit had worked. Her design, her mind had won. She looked at the stars through the window and whispered softly, "I never thought I'd live to see them from up here." Jack sat down next to her, setting his tools aside. "You didn't just see them," he said. "You reached them." She turned toward him. "What happens now?" Jack looked at her for a long moment. "That's your choice now. You're free." Free. The word echoed inside her like music. She had been trapped so long, the idea of freedom felt like a dream. But now it was real. Her limbs still needed help. Her strength was still growing. But her mind, her voice, and her future, they were hers again. "I want to travel," she said. "I want to see more than this station, more than the pain. I want to meet others, teach, build, help those like me." Jack smiled. "Then let's go." They prepared the ship together. She assisted in real time, moving her arms slowly but with purpose. Every new task felt like a small miracle. She adjusted a control dial, connected 2 wires. When her hand shook, Jack steadied it but never took over. He knew she needed to feel it herself. Before they launched, Lyra stood by the hatch. She looked back at the colony, the place that had nearly become her grave. Then she closed the door, sealing her past behind her. The ship lifted into the dark sky, leaving behind the place where she was abandoned. Now, she wasn't just a girl who survived. She was a builder, a dreamer, a voice for those who had none. They moved among the stars. News of the human and the paralyzed girl spread, not as gossip, but as legend. Stories were told of the alien girl who stood when she was meant to fall, of the human who didn't see a broken thing, but a brilliant mind trapped inside a silent body. Together they became symbols, not just of kindness, but of what belief can do. One night, as the stars twinkled outside and the ship floated quietly through space, Lyra looked at Jack and whispered, "You didn't just save me. You reminded me who I really am." Jack looked back at her, eyes warm. "And you reminded me what being human really means." She smiled, not with her voice box, not with wires or blinking lights, but with her face, her eyes, her soul. Because this was no longer the end of her story. It was the beginning of something beautiful for both of them.